Greetings and salutations, Visigoth here, and today I'm doing something a little different. I'm actually going to show you and share with you a build that I made for a friend in a guild. It's kind of like a group-friendly or a group-centric Nightblade build for dungeon questing, you know, for doing dungeons with your group. Alright, so on bar 1, I'm using a two-handed greatsword, and the skills that I'm running are Ambush, Brawler, Dark Cloak, Sap Essence, Evil Hunter, and Flawless Dawnbreaker. On my second bar, I'm running a bow, and my skills are Focused Aim, Venom Arrow, Dark Cloak, Swallow Soul, Evil Hunter, and Shooting Star. Now let me go back and show you the passives. Under the Assassination skill line, I'm taking all of the passives. Under the Shadow skill line, I'm taking all of the passives. Under Siphon, or Siphoning, I'm taking all of the passives except for Catalyst. Now, if you use potions on a regular basis enough to make this worthwhile, Catalyst is actually an excellent passive, and you should take it. But if you're like me, and you never want to craft potions, and you don't usually buy potions, you run food buffs, then there's no point in wasting a skill point here. Now let's go to weapon. For two-hander, I'm going to take all of the passives. For bow, I'm going to take all of the passives. Personally, when I'm running this, I don't like Hasty Retreat because anything that changes the way my character affects, like when he's moving, kind of drives me up the wall. But honestly, Hasty Retreat is a passive that you would want to take, just because when you like dodge roll out of like the AoE or like the big red attacks, it makes you move a little bit faster. So this is a good one to take. We go into armor. Now, medium armor, I'm going to take all of the passives. Heavy armor, I'm going to take all of the passives except for bracing. World, now I usually just take soul summons and soul lock. I like these for the single player side of it. Basically, this allows you to revive once an hour without spending a soul gem, so you can save your soul gems for reviving when you don't have this working, or you can also save your soul gems to recharge your weapons. And I also really like Soul Lock just for every build because it allows me to buy stacks of unfilled soul gems, and then it gives me a 10% chance to automatically fill a soul gem whenever I kill something. So I usually fill quite a few. Now for this build, you'll want to be a werewolf if you can get it. If you can't, it's no big deal. You don't actually use any of the werewolf skills, just the 15% stamina regen is nice to have with this type of build. Alright, guild, Fighters Guild, you're going to take Intimidating Presence, all of the passives for Slayer, all of the, you know, like the 3 ranks, Banish the Wicked. For Mages Guild, you're going to take all of the Mages Guild passives. For Undaunted, if you have these unlocked, you're going to take both of the Undaunted passives. Now, I don't take anything for Alliance War. For Racial, the Guildie is a Bosmer, so that's why I've run this. Now, honestly, this seems to be working out extremely well as this combination, because, to be honest, it's a build built specifically for this person. Now, you might have to make some changes if you're not a Bosmer, but basically you want to take all of your passives for your race. Now, crafting, you can take the Connoisseur and the Gourmand and then decide on the situation if you want to run a regen or if you want to run an increase to your maximum stats. I tend to go with regen, but honestly, with the Bosmer, you might have to test this out. If you have tons of regen, you're not ever running out or getting, you know, literally, if you get low, that's one thing. If you run out, that's another. If you're never running out, then you might want to try running a food buff, you know, that increases your max stamina. If you have a better recipe that increases, like, say, 2 stats, like stamina and health, or even a tri-stat, so stamina, health, and magicka, then try that. Otherwise, I like to go with the stamina regen. Let me quickly go ahead and show you the champion points, how I've split them up, too. Let's start with the thief line. So, the tower, I like to go 30 points into Warlord and 15 points into Magician. Now this is assuming that you have 45 points. Now if you don't have 45 points, that's perfectly fine. This will at least give you a guide to see where you're working towards. Usually the stat that has, or the passive, the star that has more points is the one that you're going to want to take first. The star that has less points is the one that you want to take after you've put your your maximum into this. So for this build, the reduced stamina cost of spells and abilities seems to be the strongest. So I like to go with Warlord. After Warlord, then I like to take Magician, which is reduce the magicka cost of spells. Honestly, reduction of your cost seems to be really strong right now. So since this build does use some magic for healing, even though it's a stamina DPS build, it's nice to be able to cast your heal more by having this reduced cost. Now the next thing is, let's go into the Mage line. Now, I'm going to go all the way over to the Ritualist. You can see here, it's split up a little more evenly, but the one that has the most stats is still Mighty. So this is where you're going to, if you don't have 45 points, until you get 20 points, this is where you're going to want to keep putting them. So, well, until you get past 20 points, so like 21 points. But basically, you want to increase your physical damage, because this is a stamina DPS build. That's like when you play in a group, that's the role that you're playing with this build. After Mighty, then you want to go into Piercing, which is increases the amount of armor your physical attacks ignore. So in other words, it's armor penetration. This seems to be my next favorite one. And then after that, Precise Strikes, which increases the critical damage of your physical attacks. So this build is really centered around doing damage through weapon power, but also through your critical hit chance and the crit damage itself. Now, the nice thing about this is once you spend these points, the reason I do this is because Opportunist, which is okay, increases the damage of your next physical attack by 15% after you interrupt the target, is nice. But what's really nice is increases your weapon critical rating by 12% once you get 30 points in the ritual. Alright, so let's go over to Warrior. Now, Warrior's a little more spread out with its 45 points. As you can see here, I have 30 points in medium armor focus. That's kind of my main stat. So until you get more than 30 points, you want to keep pumping them into medium armor. Now, the passives that it unlocks are okay. Really, it's just to make me more survivable. That's for the medium armor. But you see the passive it gives me is gives a 20% chance to restore 781 health when you bash an enemy. Well, you are going to be bashing an enemy. You know, whenever you try to see like the red rays and you try to cancel a spell, you bash them. So there you go. There's a heal. And the next one it gives you is Phase. After roll dodging, your armor and spell resistance is increased. Well, that's also really helpful too, because since you're the DPS role in the guild or in the group, when you try to roll out of any kind of like red attacks, like when things are going crazy, this is just going to buff your armor even more and make you more survivable. The next thing I go into is actually the Lady. Now you'll notice here I have a real even split, 5 and 5. Now this is just going to make you even more survivable. This reduces poison damage and magic damage and disease damage to your character. This one, Elemental Defender, reduces flame, frost, and shock damage. So basically, all except physical is being negated by 3.1%, which is nice to have. The reason I kind of spread these out is because I really like Spell Absorption. Restores 3,360 magicka when you take flame, frost, shock, magic, earth, or oblivion damage. So it's basically all damage except for physical. When you take like a big hit, this immediately gives you 300 or 3,360 magicka back. So that means you can pop off your heal a couple times. Really useful. Now the next one I go into is the Lord. Now I only put 5 points in the Lord just because Bastion is nice to have. So increases the effectiveness of damage absorbing effects by 3%. Basically this is going to make your Brawler bubble stronger. Now since you're not doing any kind of like healing, you're not it's not your focus, none of the passives are really worth taking for this tree. But Bastion is still really nice to have. And I'm trying to stick with 45 points, because that's kind of like a good goal to reach. Alright, so now that I've gone a quick overview of the skills and the passives and the champion points, now I'm going to go into a little bit more explanation of how I use these skills and how they kind of synergize together. That's really what's important for me when I do builds, is how they play, not just the stats. You know, you can go 100% into damage and you do tons of damage, but that's what I call potential damage. If you can't stay alive to do that damage, then your build is useless. So I always try to make sure that I can stay alive with my build and yet still also do lots of damage. So Ambush is just a nice opener. You know, as a melee character, You know, you want to have a gap closer. It just makes everything like a lot more enjoyable to move around. Since ambush comes from the assassination line, that means that all of these passives affect this skill and are affected by this skill. So if we come in here and look at Master Assassin, increases weapon and spell damage while invisible or stealth by 10%. Successful stealth attacks stun for 100% longer. This literally goes into stealth, and then you teleport basically to your target. So this applies to this skill. Executioner, while using assassination abilities, killing an enemy with an assassination ability restores 1,428 magicka over 6 seconds. Now this is really nice to have too, because even though you might not think about this being a finisher, if you're in a group situation, when you charge to an enemy that already had reduced health, you might or probably will kill that enemy. So then that triggers this. So basically charging from enemy to enemy will regen your magicka, which is really nice to have. Pressure points. Increases critical strike rating for each assassination ability slotted. Current bonus 419. Well, that's nice because your critical strike rating is the ability for you to do crit. So if we come back over here and look at our crit, you can actually see my critical strike rating is up 54.2%. That's pretty good. I mean, honestly. Now, of course, I only have one assassination skill on my line, but why not take it if I have the skill points? So now under the two-handed, since that's our next skill on our skill bar, Brawler. Brawler is an excellent survivable skill. It still does AoE cone damage in front of you. Basically think about almost half, circle in front of you is where this affects. It's a cone radius, in front. So it deals 1,980 physical damage and causes an additional dot damage, which is bleeding, for 2,415 physical damage over 10 seconds. So that's just a nice AoE skill. But what I really love about this is the survivability side of it. If you see, it says also shields you from damage for 8 seconds, absorbing up to 1,388 damage. What's great about that is it's 100% mitigation. So literally, until you take 1,388 damage, you aren't taking more damage. That's why I prefer bubbles over like dodging or things like that, because even though you might dodge one attack, you still take the next attack. So if you're not careful, if you jump into a group of 6 or 7 guys, you can easily take enough damage to kill yourself. Whereas with Brawler, you can keep spamming Brawler until, like 3 of those guys are dead, and then you're only left with 3 guys. It's a lot nicer, because then you can stop spamming Brawler at that point and go into doing like your Dark Cloak or your Sap Essence. But anyways, let's go back to how the passives affect this skill. So you'll see Forceful here. This is really nice to have. It allows your standard attacks to hit more than one target. So literally anytime you do an attack with your two-handed sword, you're hitting at least 3 guys. I mean, that's that's going to make your trash clears go faster, because now anytime you swing your weapon, you're hitting 3 guys. That's nice. Now, heavy weapons, I like to run two-handed because you'll see here it says 5% extra damage. I usually tend to go with just straight damage, and I don't go so much with damage over time or penetration, because I get that from other places. So I usually try to buff up my damage as much as I can, and then anything else after that I will get from a different source. That's why I like heavy weapons and I run a two-handed sword. Now let's go to Balanced Blade. Reduces the cost of two-handed abilities by 20%. Now, I'm only using one two-handed ability, but I am spamming it, so that's nice to have, because it means that my Brawler now only costs 1,652 stamina, which is not a lot with this build because it's pure stamina. Alright, now Follow-Up is really nice to have. Gives you a 10% damage bonus on the next attack after a full charge heavy attack. So literally, anytime you see a dazed or stunned enemy, you can exploit that state that they're in and do more damage and knock them on their butts. Well, when you do that, that's a heavy attack. You have to do a heavy attack or a fully charged attack. After that, your next attack is then going to do 10% more damage. So, I mean, if you pop off Brawler, you're going to do more damage, which is just nice. Alright, Battle Rush. Battle Rush is amazing. It boosts your stamina regeneration by 30% for 10 seconds after you kill an enemy. So since this is a stamina build, you can see why your stamina regen is nice to have. Now let's go to my third skill, which is Dark Cloak. Now, this skill is kind of like your oh crap skill, but it's also a nice skill to just kind of stick in your rotation when you need it. So you can use it as an oh crap, but you can also use it just to make your entire build stronger while you're killing things. So you cloak yourself in a shadow to become invisible for 2.9 seconds and remove 4 damage over time effects. So literally, if you jump into a group of, like, say, 7 guys and you're clearing trash with your guildies or your group, you can pop this when you start taking a lot of damage. Like, if guys have applied, if you've had a bunch of dots applied to you, like poison or bleed effects, when you use this, it takes those off. Now, what's really nice is the way that this works with your passives from your shadow line. If you see here, increases stamina recovery. Okay, well, that's just a passive. Like, literally, just by taking this, you get more stamina recovery, which is excellent. But, like, right here, activating a shadow ability. This is a shadow ability, so when you activate this ability, your armor is increased by 5,120 for 6 seconds. That's really nice. That means that you just got, a defensive bonus for 6 seconds. Well, shoot. Yeah, after 6 seconds is over, you just cast this again, you get that bonus again. I mean, that's pretty awesome. And what's really nice is that this build is actually being run with 5 pieces of medium armor and 2 pieces of heavy. So it's actually the time that this lasts, this armor buff is increased because I'm wearing 2 pieces of heavy armor. That's why it's 6 seconds. Let's go to the next passive. Each shadow ability slotted increases your max health by 3%. So just by having this skill on my bar, the skill by itself is really nice to have, but just by having it here, now I've got more health, which makes me even tankier. Well, shoot, survivability, if you can't survive, you can't do damage. So potential damage doesn't matter. Actual damage matters. Alright, and Dark Veil increases duration of shadow abilities by 15%. So if you'll notice, this is 2.9 seconds. Well, that's being increased by this passive. So I can actually pop this and use this as an oh crap skill. Because literally, while you're cloaked and you don't attack, if you attack, it breaks it. If you just pop Dark Cloak for 2.9 seconds, nothing happens to you. So that gives you a chance to regen health, to regen stamina, to regen magicka. I mean, literally, it's like a pause for the combat. And it's also removing any dots you have on yourself. And it's applied the damage, the armor increase, so that once it ends, you have more armor. So that's awesome. Now let's go into Sap Essence, which is actually working out of the siphoning skill tree. So all the passes from siphoning apply to this skill. Now, Sap Essence is basically going to be your heal, but it also does AoE damage. Your first bar is literally for AoE damage. You can use it for soloing, but it's excellent for clearing trash, and also when bosses have ads. That's basically what this is for, this bar. So Sap Essence, siphon the vigor from your enemy's blood, dealing, here's your magic damage, 1,235 magic damage to all nearby enemies. So it's literally an 8-meter radius AoE skill. So in other words, 8 meters around your character in all directions, 360 degrees, it does this damage to any targets there. What's really nice is that, and healing nearby allies, so yourself plus anyone in the group, for 656 plus 20% more for each enemy hit. Well, since you're using this when you're clearing trash or when you're clearing ads from a boss, you're basically going to have a whole bunch of guys around you. So that's just going to increase that healing by a lot. And it's also nice because it's not just for you, it's for your whole group. So everyone is going to be a little bit more survivable because you're helping the healer heal. Excellent, excellent skill. Now the second part to this is, if an enemy is hit, you gain major brutality and major sorcery. So literally increasing your weapon damage, which is Brawler, and also your standard and heavy attacks with your two-hander. Also increases your sorcery, which is your spell damage, which, if you notice, Sap Essence itself is magic-based damage. So when you use Sap Essence, it actually makes itself do more damage, which is nice, because then that means you're really pumping out a lot of AoE. Now, it only lasts for 20 seconds, but that's fine. You're going to kind of spam this skill when you get towards the end of combat. So you're going to use Brawler to keep yourself alive and survivable while still doing damage. But once all of the guys that you're fighting have got down to like 20% health, then you're going to start spamming Sap Essence to heal yourself and also to still kill them and finish them off. It's really useful. Now let's look at how the passives affect it. With siphoning ability slotted, increases max magicka by 8%. So literally, this is a siphoning ability. So by having this on your bar, you're increasing your magicka pool by 8%, which then allows you to cast this skill, since it uses magicka, more. So it's really nice to have. Alright, Soul Siphoner. Increases the effectiveness of your healing done by 3% for each siphon ability slotted. Now, you only have one siphon ability, so you're only getting 3%, but since it is a heal, the healing that you get from this is actually increased by this passive. So this is really nice to have too, because it makes this skill even stronger. Now let's look at Transfer. Activating a siphon ability grants 2 additional ultimate. Literally, you're spamming this, so every 4 seconds that you've used this skill, you're getting 2 additional ultimate on top of hitting with your light attacks or your heavy attacks to gain ultimate. Now, you're not going to use that ultimate to use Flawless Dawnbreaker. Flawless Dawnbreaker is just on your bar for that 8% damage increase, the weapon damage. But when you switch to your secondary bar and you look at Shooting Star, that's what you're going to use all that ultimate that you've been generating to cast off. Shooting Star is good for bosses, but it's also, if you're generating enough ultimate, it's also really nice for ads and clearing trash. It makes that go by super quickly. So the next skill is Evil Hunter. Now, Evil Hunter is actually from the Fighters Guild skill line. Now, the main reason that I take Evil Hunter is really for the weapon crit. Now, if you notice at the very bottom, it says, while slotted, increases your weapon critical rating by 2,099. That's the main reason I run Evil Hunter. If you want to use Evil Hunter, in other words, not have it actively on your bar, but actually activate it in combat, that's fine. But when you're not fighting Undead and Daedra, you have a 4% chance to get that back. But honestly, that's kind of weak. Now, it works decently well when you're fighting Undead and Daedra, and Undead and Daedra tend to be like 2/3, kind of depending on how you kind of want to look at it. But what's really nice about this skill is that weapon crit. That's what I want it for. Now, you notice Flawless Dawnbreaker, like I said again, the reason that I've got Flawless Dawnbreaker is for that 8% increase to weapon damage. I don't really activate it. You can if you want to, but honestly at 100 ultimate, it's half of the cost of Shooting Star. So I would just save it and not cast Flawless Dawnbreaker. Alright, now that we've covered the first bar, let's go to the second bar. Now your second bar, you can see it's a bow. So the second bar, the role that it fills is for, like in a trash pull, say you're killed everything, but you want to take out like the healers or the archers really quickly. Well, you can switch to this bar, and it does a little bit more single target damage than your first bar. Your first bar is great for AoE. Your second bar is single target damage. It's also what you would switch to when you're fighting the boss in a dungeon. Or even like if you're in a group and you're doing any kind of content where you want to kind of stand back from whatever it is you're fighting. You know, like if there's just a whole bunch of like AoE going on the ground and you don't want to be standing in that because you're, you know, a stamina DPS build and you don't have tons of survivability, then just back up and shoot stuff with the bow. But it's really spec'd for boss fights. So you'll see your first skill here is Focused Aim. Now the reason I like Focused Aim over the other morph, let's go to weapon, is because Focused Aim, if you read here, it says plant a masterfully aimed arrow in an enemy's vital spot, dealing 5,382 physical damage. Right off the bat, that is a decent amount of damage for only costing you 1,652 stamina to cast it. Now it does have a 1-second cast time, but because you're playing with a group and you're standing back shooting the boss, the cast time is not an issue. It's just a great single target attack. Now the mark increases the range from which the enemy can be hit by bow attacks by 5 meters. So that literally means that your next skill, which is Venom Arrow, can now be shot from 28 meters. So you're getting pretty close to the same distance. Now obviously, you know, 35 meters versus 28 meters is not the same, but it's a little closer at least than what it was. Now the next thing is also afflicts the enemy with Minor Fracture, which reduces the enemy's armor. Now hopefully your tank is running Puncture, which afflicts the enemy with Major Fracture. So now you've put Major Fracture and Minor Fracture on the boss. So that means that his armor is reduced by a heck of a lot. So everyone in the group does more damage to the boss. So that's basically that. It's just, you know, your good single target damage skill that also increases the range you can shoot with your next single target damage skill. So Venom Arrow. Shoot an arrow coated in Shadow Scale Poison, dealing 2,157 poison damage, and an additional dot of 3,380 poison damage over 10 seconds. That's just a good damage skill, and it's got a decent range on it, so you don't have to stand in all of the AoE red, death. The reason I like Venom Arrow over the other morph is because enemies hit while casting are interrupted and put off balance and stun for 3 seconds. Basically, this allows you to kind of pop this in every time that you need to cancel something from the boss. If you can cancel the boss's big AoE attack or his like single target, uppercut. If you can cancel it, that means that your tank and any melee DPS that are standing next to it don't have to take that damage. It's really nice to have. So it basically is a way to apply a dot while you're then going back and applying shooting focused aim a couple times. And then once this is down, you then go back and apply this again, and then you keep shooting this. It's really a good combination. Now I tend to have my oh crap or my survivability skills on both bars. So Dark Cloak, like you saw before, was on my first bar, while I also put it on my second bar. And whichever slot, you don't have to put these in this exact order, you can put them wherever you're comfortable with, but I do suggest that you put like skills in the same place. So you'll notice I've got my oh crap here, and also my passive buff, Dark Cloak. Well, it's also in the same spot, number 3, on my second bar. That way the only thing that really changes is, like my damage skills. Now you'll notice, I've got damage, 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 survivability, survivability, heal, heal, passive bonus damage. So I mean, literally, I try to keep the concept or what the skills are doing in the same spot. They might not be the same skill, but I'm using them in the same kind of ways. It just makes your muscle memory much easier to pick up and learn. Alright, so we've already explained Dark Cloak. Now let's go to this skill. This is a different one than what I've used on my other bar. It's called Swallow Soul. And basically the reason I like this skill is because it performs the same function as Sap Essence. But the difference is that Sap Essence only has an 8-meter range, where Swallow Soul has a 28-meter range, which is the same distance as your Venom Arrow. So this allows you to stand off and still do your range damage, but also gives you a dot heal. So steals an enemy's life force, dealing 2,174 magic damage. Now that's nice. Damage is good, but what I really like about it is it heals you for 25% of the damage inflicted every 2 seconds. So it's a HOT, or an HOT, a heal over time. So literally you pop this off, and then you go back to shooting, Venom Arrow, like you apply Venom Arrow, and then you pop this off, and then you keep casting focused aim. Maybe you'll get 2 or 3 in, and then you pop Venom Arrow, and then you pop this off. And basically it's a way to keep damage on the target, with dots, but also to keep some healing coming into you. Really nice to have. The other thing I really like about this skill is that while it's on your bar, in other words, while it's slotted, you gain Minor Vitality. Minor Vitality increases any healing you receive by 8%. So that means now that you're doing ranged, you're standing kind of close to your healer, you're getting tons of healing because it's now increased by 8%. Really nice to have. Now I've also got Evil Hunter on this bar because, again, this is stamina DPS, so that crit that I'm getting, the weapon crit rating, is just nice to have. And why not have, a passive skill? I really like builds that have some passives on them, things that I don't necessarily use 100% of the time, because then that means I'm only concentrating on 4 skills while I'm concentrating on moving and, canceling skills. And I mean, because there's more to Elder Scrolls combat than just using your skill rotation. I mean, like not standing in the red, canceling skills that, are really strong, rezzing allies when they go down. There's a bunch of other things that you have to keep track of, and not just your skill rotation. So as much as I can simplify a build and yet still have it be very strong, that's the way I'm going to go. Now we can talk about the ultimate. The thing I really like about the ultimate, actually, I should have covered passives and how the passives apply to these skills. Alright, let's go back. Let's start with focused aim. Now focused aim is really nice because it works with long shots. Gives you a damage bonus of up to 12% against enemies at longer range. If you'll notice, I took stuff that increases my range. So that means by default, I'm just going to do more damage because I'm shooting from longer ranges. Alright, accuracy. Increases weapon critical rating. So literally, I mean, you'll look, my weapon crit's 57.2%. That's awesome. That means I'm doing more damage. Ranger. Reduces the stamina cost of bow abilities. That's why these only cost, 1,600, 1,200, because I've got that passive. Really nice. Hawkeye increases the damage of your bow attacks by 15% when striking off-balance enemies. Well, if you're in a group, most likely the guys are going to be getting knocked off balance. Even if if you cancel a boss with Venom Arrow, that will set that boss off balance, and then you'll get more damage with this. Now, of course, Hasty Retreat, like I said at the beginning, if you want to take it, it's perfectly fine to take. It makes you move faster after you roll dodge. I just don't necessarily like to run it when I'm testing out builds. Alright, so that's basically covered that. So now I already explained how the passives work with Dark Cloak, and the same applies to Swallow Souls because it's a siphon ability. So the way the passives apply are still the same as the way that they apply to Sap Essence, which is really nice. And that's the really nice thing, is I'm trying to take advantage of all of the passive skills that I have that I have access to. That's why I try to have a Dark Cloak, which comes from Shadow, and I try to have a Siphon for the siphoning. Now, the one thing that I don't have on this bar that I kind of gave up was an Assassination skill. So I'm not taking advantage of all the passives from the Assassination skill line on my second bar. But as much as I'd like to have them, it just doesn't really work out that way. Now let's go into the Mage's Guild, and I'll show you why I like having this skill. So Shooting Star. The role that this build is playing is DPS for group content. So Shooting Star is an excellent DPS ultimate. You call a comet down from the constellations to blast an enemy, dealing 6,101 flame damage to all enemies in the area. So literally, it's an AoE that's 28 meters. You can be 28 meters away and call this down. It's awesome. Now, I'm not sure what the area effect is, if it's like 5 meters or if it's 10 meters or what that is. But it's just a nice thing to pop on like bosses, but also when bosses call in like ads. Like there's one of the bosses that, I forget what dungeon it's in, but she calls in bats. And as you progress the fight, she calls in more and more bats. Well, popping this, ultimate, when there's like 10 bats or 8 bats, they all take a bunch of damage. So it's really nice. A nice passive side to this ultimate is that when you use it, it grants you 12 extra ultimate for each enemy hit. So yes, I use this on single targets, at which point I only get 12 ultimate. But when I use it on groups, I also get 12 ultimate per guy that I hit. So that's really nice. It allows me to then recast it again later on. After impact, enemies in the target area take 1,944 fire damage every second for 11.8 seconds. Now think about that. That is a ton of damage. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and add up the calculations, but I mean, think about that. It's literally almost 2,000 damage every second for 11 seconds. Whoa, it's nice to have. Yeah, now you can see why I'm basically using everything to feed just that ultimate and not using the 100 ultimate to fire off Flawless Dawnbreaker. I'd rather save that 100 ultimate and cast off Shooting Star. Really nice skill to have. Now, because this is a Mage's Guild skill, even though it's an ultimate, it still counts as a skill. It affects the passives, or the passives affect, it, or vice versa. So if we come in here and look at Mage Adept, or Mage Adept, reduces the magicka and health cost of Mage's Guild abilities by 15%. By default, this skill costs more than 200 ultimate. By having that, it costs only 200 ultimate. Really awesome. Everlasting Magic increases the duration of Mage's Guild abilities by 20%. By default, the dot on this skill is not 11.8 seconds. By having this, it's increased to 11.8 seconds, which is really nice. With Mage's Guild ability slotted, increases your max magicka and your magicka recovery by 2% for each Mage's Guild ability slotted. Now again, it's only one skill, but still, that's 2% that you didn't have before, and that's tying into your other passive that gave you 3%. So I mean, literally, it's now allowing you to pop off Swallow Soul, which costs magicka. It's allowing you to pop off Dark Cloak, which costs magicka. I mean, that's awesome. Alright, and the last one, Might of the Guild. While using Mage's Guild abilities, well, this is a Mage's Guild ability, so when you use it, this applies. Casting a Mage's Guild ability grants you Empower, increasing the damage of your next attack by 20%. Of course, you have to use that within 5 seconds. So literally, I would cast this, and then go back and cast Focused Aim. So that means that's going to do 20% more damage. So 5,382, 20%. That's a good bit of damage. So you can see how all of these tie together. All right, now I'm on the PTS, so this isn't going to be exactly like it would be on the live game. I mean, there's a few things that, you know, are a little different. Like I'm VR 14, these guys are only VR 13. But it's a good test. It's how I like to test my builds out and see how they work. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to use this build, you know, how I actually play with it. Now you can see these are, you know, like, let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5 scorpions, and they're VR 13. I'm VR 14, so I'm one level ahead of them. But this is still a good way to test it out. Basically, the way I'm going to start combat is, you don't have to go into stealth, but if you want to go into stealth, that's great. You're going to get a damage bonus. But I usually will hop in using ambush. And once I hop in, if they're spread out, if the targets are spread out a lot, I might use ambush to go to the next farthest target, to just kind of jump. And when I'm doing ambush, I'm not taking damage. So it's kind of like it allows me to not take damage for the 2 seconds, whatever it takes me to go to the next target. And then I do damage to him, which is good. And then once they all come together and they cluster together, that's when I'll start kind of spamming Brawler. Now, I won't literally spam it. In other words, hit it, you know, repeatedly, one after another. But I will use it in pretty rapid succession. I'll also pop my Dark Cloak, you know, kind of like once or twice during the fight, just because it increases my armor, but then it also removes any kind of poison or disease that they've put on me. Now, once they all kind of get pretty low in health and they're just about dead, I'll spam Sap Essence, you know, 1 or 2 times, maybe 3 times, depending on where they're at. And they'll all die, and I will get healed, because this is a heal. Now, I won't actually use Evil Hunter. It's just on my bar because it's passively increasing my crit. So let's go ahead and do this. Ambush. Ambush. Do a couple light attacks. Brawler. Do Brawler again. A couple light attacks. Pop my Cloak. Come out of my Cloak with Brawler. Do a couple more light attacks. You can see they're all getting pretty low in health. So now I'll start spamming my Siphon. 3, 4 times, 5 times. Now I'm out of Magicka. Now I'll pop Brawler again. And everybody's dead. And I've got full health. I mean, you know, how awesome is that? Now, that's just the kind of the basic way to handle this. You can kind of switch it up, you know, like however you choose to. Like, maybe instead of spamming the Siphon a bunch of times, you know, you'd cast Brawler. Or, you know, maybe, you know, because you've run out of Magicka. Or maybe you've got tons of Magicka, so you just keep spamming Sap Essence. Or maybe, you know, you want to take a second and cast Dark Cloak because you've got some dots on you. So, I mean, really, it's kind of situational. I mean, go ahead and just kind of come in here and just pop off a couple things you can kind of see. Do a couple light attacks, do some cleave. Light attacks blocked as you're doing a charge. Do some more light attacks, cancel that. My ultimate's off, or, you know, charged, so I'm going to go ahead and show you what that would be like. Oh, I don't have enough to cast it. Huh, I thought I did. And go, now I'm going into my stealth just because to remove the thing. Now I'm getting low in health. I'm going to go ahead and heal. And they're dead. I mean, you know, it's kind of like pretty easy and straightforward to do. Yet still very good damage. And also very survivable. Now, unfortunately, since the second bar, the bow bar, is designed for, you know, single target bosses and such, it's kind of hard because it's designed to be used with a tank. So the tank would keep the boss aggroed, and you wouldn't have to worry about it beating on you. So it's kind of hard for me to show you how that works. Hopefully you've got a good enough feel for how the build is being run. And, you know, I hope it works for you well, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, thanks. Bye.